Hello, folks. Welcome to another week of Learning Linux. My name is Manny Correa. This week we're going to be learning about email. We're going to be learning about the package that you need to install to um, have the email service running on your Ubuntu machine. Let's get started. So to begin with, there's actually two different types of packages that you need to do. So there's sudo apt or install. Install, and it's mail-stack-delivery. And this will install the Dovecot. Actually, I installed it already. It's the Dovecot package. And then the other package that we need to install is actually the other piece for the server to get running. And this is Postfix. Postfix is the what we call the MTA. We're going to do internet site, so it's menu driven, tab driven, and we'll click internet and we'll do OK. And then we'll just keep it what it is. I'm going to keep the default since it's not really going to be an email server, but you would typically put your system name right there, or fully qualified domain name in there. So you need to make sure that that's all set up too. So like if you're doing Manny.com, just put in the Manny.com for the domain name. So this is setting up and configuring what's the main.cf file, and we'll go and check that out when we get it all installed and set up. One of the things that you really want to think about is what is actually doing your email piece. So you think of, oh, I'm sending an email, I'm receiving an email, I'm getting my email. Back in the old days, you always had a client, and you still can use a client if you wish to. This is called an MUA, or Mail User Agent. This is where you read your email, you compose your email, and you can work with what you want to delete, what you don't want to delete. And in some clients, you have other things like trash, and you have filters in there that you are allowed to do on your local PC. The other types of clients that you have out there are webmail applications, meaning like Google. My.ccri.edu actually uses the Outlook one from Microsoft. There are a number of companies that have developed their own mail user agent that you use a web page to interact with your mailbox. And your mailbox is on what's called the mail delivery agent or local delivery agent. And for us, that is going to be Dovecot. When you click send mail, you're going to send your mail out using the MTA or mail transport agent. That is for us Postfix. So Postfix is the one that sends out email to another system. So there's three pieces to it: MUA, MTA, and MDA. And you need to kind of make sure you understand which piece is doing what. So let's check and see if it's running. We're going to look at Postfix first. I forgot sudo systemctl status Postfix. It is running and it is active. So our email server is up and running. So like I said before, we're going to go check out the main CF, and so that should be in the etc directory. Oops, typo, fat fingered it again. Okay, so we're in etc. Now there should be a Postfix directory right here, and so we can go there, ls, and see main CF. That is the file we want to look at. So if we do less main.cf, in here you'll have your my destination is my host name, so that's your domain name, my host name. So right now I just have this, but remember we need to make sure it's a fully qualified domain name, because email is done by domain names. And domain names, as we know from DNS, are converted into IP addresses. So one of the things that we want to think about is, where's all our mail going to and from? And so we need to make sure that that is there, and nobody can use our system to send out spam. And what is spam, you say? So spam is when you send out a non-solicited email to someone. So you receive spam. And I know most of you have received spam. And there's lots of types of spam out there. There are the official ones, kind of like if you sign up for looking for a house or something like that, you're going to get a lot of different types of housing emails. So be careful when you sign up for things. If you sign up into Google.com, you're going to get some emails from Google. Amazon, you're going to get some Amazon emails soliciting different products too. So these are all kind of semi-valid spam. The ones that are really a bad case are spam that is selling drugs or something like that. Non-FDA drugs from overseas. You've won $1 million type of thing. Then there are the other ones that, hey, I'm the Nigerian king or prince or whatever, and we have an extra $1 million. Can I put it in your bank account? Please send us your information, blah, blah, blah. So you got to be careful with spam. And we'll get into how to do some other protections a little bit later on spam. So the main things that you want to do here is worry about your relaying, so you don't turn relaying on. And what networks do you use? So any network that you have PCs on that want to do email, you need to make sure that they're in the My Networks configuration right here in your main CF. This is the location for any subnet that has a user in it or a server in it that's going to send email through this machine. And so you want to make sure that it's there. You can also set in quota limits. Right now 0 is is unlimited, but depending on how you want to do things, you can set quota on size of attachments, all that fun stuff too. So there's lots of things you can do in there. The other thing we want to make sure that we have people do, and this is what we need to make sure, that there is a cert. And when we talked about security and other services that we want to provide, we need to make sure that there is an encryption between the client and the server, and that when you send an email out, that it validates who you are. So you want to make sure that the user actually in the configuration of it sends or signs in to the email server and it's validating that a user has a login and they can send email out. This is a way of protecting the email server from inadvertent or other people using the system that doesn't have your account. So there's a few different things in there. There's your host name, fully qualified domain name, your domain and my destination, my networks, relaying host if you're setting up another machine to do relaying, and then there's the sign-in and making sure you have the sign-in. So those are major portions of your configuration that you want to deal with inside your mail server, and that's the main CF. So there are other things that you can figure out, that there are other configurations. Master CF is some other we're not really worried about in this course. I'm not going to go over that. But anytime you make a change to your main CF, you need to make sure that you stop and start or restart, or what's called reload your service and make sure it runs. So postfix is sending email out. You need to make sure it sends out the email. You get it, and where do you interact with that mail server is from your client, the mail user agent. There are a number of mail user agents, and I thought they were right here. I wanted to show you where they were. I guess they're in the front. I skipped over that. Sorry. It's it's so from there it is, Thunderbird. So Thunderbird is the Ubuntu kind of default email package that is installed on the desktop. Most people know about Outlook. There are many different other types of pieces of software that can be installed on your desktop to be used as a mail user agent. But as we progress into this web-based world, like I said before, other programs will be web-based, meaning you're going to log into a web page. So there is a web Outlook for you to log in, Google and all the others too. Inside there, that web Outlook app has to communicate with the server itself. And the communication between these two in the old days was POP. And then they added a more secure protocol, and that's called IMAP. And that's from the user agent to the delivery agent. So you can communicate in there and get your email. Sending email out is from the email server itself is SMTP. So when you send email through the server, it's SMTP. So there's 3 different protocols you got to remember. SMTP, POP, and IMAP. IMAP is the one used by most of the mail user agents today. All servers sending mail will use SMTP. There is a way that you can do encryption between the mail user agent and the server, and it doesn't always have to do with IMAP, but the majority of them use IMAP and then maybe tunneling in there for encryption purposes. And so you'll read about that in the chapter. There are other types of email servers out there. Postfix is just a common one. Old is SendMail. Courier is kind of old. Also Qmail, a little bit older too, but we're all kind of old. There's probably a lot more out there in today's world. So we talked about spam, and in the vast majority of email that is out on the internet today, there's a huge email spam is a problem in the world. So people are getting way too much spam. When you think about how much spam, let me see if I can find a website that shows that. How much spam is on the internet today? There is 4 billion. That's crazy. But when you think of email, how much is actually legitimate email? And when we think about percentage-wise, it's usually around 75 or more percent is spam. What you don't realize is a lot of companies will actually set up a protection for their users and drop a lot of that bad spam before it even hits the email server, because the email server has resources on it and they want to protect those resources. So there's technologies, and one of the technologies is called gray listing. It's built into the server. And oops, I missed that. Oh, that's not it either. So one of the technologies is called gray listing. And what gray listing does, and it's one of those protections that servers have set up, that when you send an email to a server, and this is the first time that server is receiving an email from your domain, the very first time it receives an email from anybody in your domain, it's going to reject it and send back, hey, I rejected this, please send me another. So by default, your email server will send another email, resend it. Then the second time that the server receives it, it'll put you in kind of like a whitelist. So there's a gray list and a white list. The gray list is, I know I've never seen this one before. Typical spam servers only send out 10,000, 20,000 or more spams quickly, boom. And then they never send anything else out. So they won't send a reply back. They won't send another email out. So this gray listing helps cut down on that second spam again. Or, hey, this guy, I'm suspecting he's bad. Let's kind of mark him as bad. I'm not going to accept any email from him. Boom. Other companies will set up a list, and then people can then check to that list. We'll get to that in a second. So gray listing is part of this server that actually the MTA, and where it'll do this on every single email that's from an unknown domain. It rejects the first one, and then the valid email server will send another one, and that's gray listing. That's one technology. The other is either called a real-time black hole list or a real-time block list, and it's Mail Abuse Prevention System, or MAPS. And I have used and I have experience with one called Spamhaus. Spamhaus is what you do is subscribe to it in like a yearly fee, I don't know, $300-400, and it will constantly update your email server with a list of suspected bad spam email servers on a kind of like a reputation based. So let's say 1 through 10, and you set a reputation based. If 10 is good and 1 is bad, if anything goes below 5, I'm not going to accept email from it. So as long as your email server isn't sending out too much spam and your reputation doesn't go below that 5, then you won't be on my bad list or real-time block list or real-time black hole list. And this company will update that list for you, and all you do is you have your email server client. It's kind of like when you read about it in the book, it talks about a client and the RBL, and what happens is it communicates to it all the time. It will download, it's basically just a text file of IP addresses and domain names saying don't accept email from these. And then as the list gets updated, once you get on this list, it takes around 3 or 4 days to get off of this list. So you got to prove that who you are. You have to send them emails. You're saying, all right, I need to get off here. So there's a whole process to get off here. We had problems back in, I want to say, 6 years ago, when there was a lot of spam going out, hitting CCRI, and we didn't really have great protection for that type of spam. And so students were clicking on these emails, returning these emails, faculty were doing it also, and we were sending out spam. So boom, we'd get put on the list, and probably every 2 months we'd have to go and get off of this list. And then people that were using this as their real-time block list, then we couldn't send them email for a few days until we get back off of that list. So it was a real pain to do. We finally implemented some more rules on who can send out a certain amount of emails in a certain time frame, and then we got a new what we call email scrubber. But the book talks about one, and I'm going to talk about this next. So that is called Spam Assassin. Where is it? Spam Assassin, right here. So Spam Assassin is actually a server that runs, and it will detect common spam messages, and you can also put in your own checks for Spam Assassin. And so it's like, don't accept email from here. And also, you can tie Spam Assassin into one of these real-time block lists. So you don't use the resources from your email server. you set up the Spam Assassin to receive all of your email and also send email out. So if somebody is got compromised, their client, their PC got compromised, and then they try to use your email server to send spam out, boom, Spam Assassin is going to say, nope, 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 block it right there. So it'll protect you from being put on a spam block list. It'll also protect you from spam coming in. And how do we check spam? One of the things that we check spam with is if we use the headers and body checks. So what's the header? So the email is broken up into pieces. The body is basically the message that you have. The header is where did that email come from, what client sent it, what IP address, date and time, and then it follows and there's a trail for that email as it goes through. So there's a header and a footer of your email when you send it out, and it gets tagged with information about the MUA that you're using, the piece of software, the operating system sometimes depending on the MUA, and typically the user that sends it, domain name, and then it hits the email server. IP address is also in there, and then so on. Any email server that touches that email will put a piece of information in on that header. One of the problems is headers can be kind of faked. For real smart hackers can fake email headers. But in general, those are just checking the header, looking for DNS domain names or that you're on the list, boom, and I'm blocking you if you're in my real-time block list. Then also anything that's custom that you want to set up for yourself, that's in there also. So reject RBL client, that's what I was talking about earlier, that connects to map service or real-time block lists. So that would be the one that communicates with spamhaus.org, and you would communicate back and forth with that list, and every time an email comes in, it would check against that. And then if you're on that list, boom, you get stopped. So POP IMAP server. This is the local delivery agent or MDA, mail delivery agent. This is what users interact with, and this is what stores your email. Meaning that you have a mailbox on them, and your mailbox is stored on the server itself. There can be a large amount of data that gets associated with a user's email because of attachments. If you send files, there are restrictions on the amount of or the size of the file that you can send, but typically not on the amount. So what you do is you give them a certain amount that they can store. So their mailbox can be, let's say, 20 gig. And then, so you can only use 20 gig of data on the email server. But if you times that by 1,000, or 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, you're going to have a lot of storage capabilities that you need to set up on your MDA or LDA. So this is one of those concerns when people manage email servers is how many users do I have, what's the quota on their size, and then making sure that people don't go over that quota and they follow proper procedures in order to do that. So that's one of the concerns when you're building a server and making sure people stay there. The other thing is when we talk about the users, where are the users stored? And this is just about everything we talk about now from client server perspective is we want to add security in there. The security in there means that we have a user accounts, and user accounts need to be authenticated. That means we need to have encryption put in place. And so they're going to talk about SSL encryption, which is part of email nowadays. So you can actually get the certificate. It uses public key infrastructure. And from a user database, you don't want to store 1,000 users locally on the in a database. So we use a central database, so they use the same username and password across all of them. And we use LDAP for that, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. You can use MySQL and PAM, but we typically use the LDAP, which is a server centrally located, and then when the email needs to be authenticated from the user's perspective, then it checks against the LDAP server, and the password is stored on the LDAP server and never gets stored on the email server itself. So if the email server gets compromised, then you don't have to worry about your password getting compromised. But if you respond to an email and put your username and password in there, there's no stopping that from happening. So where's your mailbox stored in the Linux Ubuntu? It's in the var mail location, and it's called an mbox for the user. So there'll be user mbox stored inside there. Spam Assassin, Mailman. So the other flip side, some companies need to send out mass mailings. So if you don't want to become put on a real-time block list, how do you get around doing mass mailings? You use a thing called Mailman, which has a web interface and stuff like this where you have all your users' email addresses in there, and then you can actually set up a time where it'll send them out at a particular rate, and you can do all sorts of configurations in there to send out your mail. And so Mailman is when you want to do mailing lists, and you can do up to thousands of users or emails on that mail list. So to wrap up, there's 3 main things you got to worry about: is the mail transfer agent, mail delivery agent, mail user agent, and email. What your fully qualified domain is, what networks you're running on, and make sure you're not relaying. Make sure you're encrypted. Make sure you're set up that you can only send an email if you validated a user account. And then keep an eye on quotas for people's mailboxes, and then protecting yourself against spam. And typically that's usually a separate appliance rather than using the email server, because the email server is handling all the email. And for a larger enterprise, you might even have 2 email servers or 3 email servers, or a cluster. So then you would have what we call email scrubbers in front of that, or even outsource it. So I know CCRI has outsourced their email, and we use Microsoft for our email. A lot of schools go to Google for their email. But we used to run an email for years and years and years and years. And we used to run the students' email server too, which got way out of hand, and that's what we moved out first. So that's a wrap. I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.